Good evening. This is Ed Reed, Program Director at Fair Count. I hope that you and your family are safe and healthy during this time. We're delighted that people from across the country are joining us this evening for this national discussion on the critical importance of the 2020 census for Black men. We're holding this telephone town hall event to update you on the progress of this year's count in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have an exciting slate of featured guests joining us, including former Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder Jr. But most importantly, we want to hear from you. This is an interactive conversation. If you would like to ask a question at any time, just press 9 on your phone. Again, just press 9 on your phone at any time to let us know that you'd like to ask a question. I'd like to get started by introducing our special guest this evening. Attorney General Eric Holder is a lifelong public servant and career Department of Justice official, having served in multiple presidential administrations and most recently as the 82nd Attorney General of the United States, a role in which he served for more than 6 years. He's currently chairing a national redistricting campaign. Attorney General Holder, thanks for being on the line.
Well, thanks for having me, Ed. I look forward to the conversation that we're going to have and the ability to talk about a very important topic. Thank
you, A.G. Holder. For those of you who are just joining the call, you're on a live telephone town hall conversation discussing Black Men Count, a national effort to ensure a fair and accurate count in the 2020 census. We want to hear your questions and concerns tonight, so just press 9 to raise your hand to ask a question. Again, just press 9 on your phone to raise your hand and ask a question. Now going to tune in to introduce our next special guest, Congressman Steven Horsford. Congressman Horsford made history as Nevada's first African-American state majority leader. He brings a principled focus on job creation, community development, and skills development to Congress. He also chairs the Congressional Black Caucus's Census Task Force. Congressman Steven Horsford, thank you for being on tonight's call.
Thank you. It's great to be on, and I'm looking forward to discussing some of the efforts at the congressional level impacting the 2020 census.
Thank you so much, Congressman Horsford. We're delighted that we have over 1,000 participants already on this evening's call as we discuss the 2020 census and the need to ensure Black men specifically are counted in 2020. If you would like to get in line to ask a question, again, please press 9 on your phone. Press 9 on your phone to ask a question. Turning now to our next special guest, Dr. Gregory Vincent, who serves as the 48th Grand Sire Archon of the Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity, or also known as the Boule. Dr. Vincent previously served as the 16th president of Hobart and William Smith Colleges, his alma mater. Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity is the oldest African-American Greek-lettered organization. Dr. Vincent, thank you for being on tonight's call. Great. Thank you so much. If you would like to get in line to ask one of our distinguished guests a question, just press 9 on your phone at any time. In addition to your live questions, we will have a few poll questions about the 2020 census that you all can weigh in on. Now turning to introduce our last special guest, who is no stranger to us all, Mr. Marc Morial. Marc Morial is the president and CEO of the National Urban League, the nation's largest historic civil rights and urban advocacy organization, and he is the former mayor of New Orleans, where he served from 1994 to 2002. Thank you for being on the call, Mr. Morial.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with Attorney General Holder, Dr. Gregory Vincent, Steven Horsford, and certainly with you, Ed. And I want to thank Stacey Abrams and the entire Fair Count team for sponsoring and for convening this discussion this evening. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morial. Thank you to all those who are online right now joining this interactive conversation with Black Men Count leaders from across the nation. Please press 9 on your phone if you would like to ask a question. Again, please press 9 on the phone if you would like to ask one of our special guests a question. Black Men Count is a Fair Count initiative launched in May of 2019. Attorney General Eric Holder joined Fair Count's founder, leader Stacey Abrams, at the launch of the Black Men Count Complete Count Committee in Georgia. Black Men Count is composed of faith leaders, elected officials, barbers, students, fraternity leaders, and returning citizens. These men have created an innovative approach for outreach targeting Black men around the 2020 census. Before we go into your live questions and we hear from our special guests, I'd like to ask our first poll question of the night. Each participant can answer by pressing a button on your phone, and we'll share the results in a couple of minutes. Please wait to hear all of the answers before you press a button. Again, before we go to the live questions, we're going to ask our first poll question of the night. How many people on tonight's call have already completed the 2020 census? Again, how many people on tonight's call have already completed the 2020 census? Please press 1 if yes, I have completed the 2020 census. Press 2, no, I have not. Press 3, no, I haven't, but I'm planning to complete in the near future. Again, the question is, how many people on tonight's call have already completed the 2020 census? Push 1 for yes, I've completed the 2020 census. Push 2 for no, I have not. Push 3, no, I haven't, but I'm planning to complete in the very near future. We'll give you a few more seconds to answer this question. For those of you just joining the conversation with Black Men Count National Leaders, you can be a part of this discussion by pressing 9 on your phone. It looks like as the results are coming in, over 70% of the folks have said that they have completed the 2020 census. So we got a little work to do, but that means that the folks on this call will certainly be able to engage others in this conversation. Any one of our guest speakers care to chime in about the level of engagement of men and women on this call? I'd like to maybe turn to Mr. Morial, who might have some insight on kind of how we're pivoting out of the COVID-19 pandemic and to kind of hear that over 70% of people on this call have already completed the 2020 census. I think is a good sign that we're going certainly in the right direction, but we certainly have some work to do.
Yeah, let me first of all thank all of those who joined tonight's National Tele-Townhall, and let me especially thank all of you who filled out the 2020 census form. That 70% of callers tonight have done so is a powerful and positive thing. However, our work is not done. Our work is not done. And let me tell you why. While nationwide response rates are fundamentally focused on computer response or online response, are nearing 50%, 45 to 50%. Response rates in Black communities and in brown communities lag behind. We have a lot more work to do to ensure that we're counting. This count is not a count for the sake of a count. This count is a count about power and money. Political power and how district lines are drawn for Congress, state legislatures, city councils, places that elect judges, justices of the peace, county commissioners, county clerks, all sorts of positions that we elect. The district lines are drawn based on the data from the census. We must be counted. We see now with COVID-19 that how federal funds are distributed matters in terms of the count. So in any given year with an almost $4 trillion federal budget, approximately 1/4 of those dollars are distributed based on the data included in the census. Free lunch programs, Head Start programs, food stamp programs, dollars for community development, housing, job training, and workforce all depend on the dollars in the census, the count in the census, I should say. So it is essential that we understand the reason for the count. Black men, this is our time to lead. Black men in the household, Black men in the community, we need to lead the way so that this is the most successful census that we've ever had. Now, the National Urban League, along with others, so we were there early, pushed the Census Bureau aggressively to extend the time of the census. They've extended that time from the end of July now into October, which creates more time for the census to be able to take place. Right now, Census is about to send out paper forms to millions and millions of people who did not fill out the census form online. After that process is done, the Census will send enumerators or door knockers out The safety of that part of the program is super important in the COVID-19 atmosphere. And that's why we pushed for an extension of the census so that these enumerators would not go out prematurely while social and physical distancing is still underway, while self-quarantine is still underway in many jurisdictions. We're going to have to be vigilant to ensure that the census enumerator process, which is the last part of the census, takes place in a fair way and in an equitable way, and that every door that needs to be knocked, in fact, gets knocked by the census. So our job is to hold the Census Bureau's feet to the fire, collaborate with them and partner with them when possible and to the extent that we can, and encourage and motivate everyone in our community to participate in the census. I'm asking the brothers, particularly, the brothers that are listening tonight, black men, to stand up and let's all use our voices to encourage people in our family to participate in the census, to encourage people in our networks to participate in the census, to encourage people in our churches to participate in the census, to encourage people in our neighborhoods to participate in the census, to encourage others in our family to participate in the census. You can go now to makeblackcount.org, which is the website of the Black Census Roundtable, and there's a sample of the form and other detailed information that you may need on the census. So I'm proud to be a part of this conversation tonight. What is the bottom line? The census is about money and power. We must be counted because we lived with these results for an entire decade. We know that there are forces that want to suppress the count. They're the same forces that want to suppress the vote. We cannot bend our knee. We cannot be weak. We've got to be strong. We've got to demand that we are counted, and we've got to do our part to ensure the same. So thanks for having me this evening.
Thank you so much. We're glad that thousands of you have taken the time out to join tonight's national discussion on the critical importance of the 2020 census for black men. We want to hear your questions for our special guest tonight. So press 9 on your phone to get in line to ask a question. We're going to go now, turning to Attorney General Holder. So failure to get an accurate count negatively impacts our power because census data are used to allocate political power at the federal, state, and local levels. AG Holder, can you talk a little bit about why this is so critically important for black men?
Sure. And again, thanks for having me. One of the primary things about the census that is important, as Marc Morial mentioned, is the allocation of political power. Decisions are made on the basis of the census, for instance, about how many congressmen a state will have. Alabama's going to lose population. Well, they'll potentially lose a congressman. California is going to increase their count, increase the number of people who are said to be living in California. They will get an increase in the number of congressmen. So political power is determined on the basis of the census, certainly on the federal level, but that's true on the state level as well. If you're looking to figure out where a particular congressman should be, what his district should look like, what a state representative's district should look like, what her district should look like, that is all done on the basis of the census. So it's not only a question of how many, the determination is also made as to where the power will be located. If in African American communities there is an undercount, there are people who do not respond to the census, or if there is a determination made not to count people in the African American community, that means there will be fewer representatives from that community, both at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level. And therefore, there will be fewer people in our state legislatures, in our Congress, who will be sensitive to and responding to the needs of the African American community. So this is, in addition to the economic things that Marc Morial talked about, this is about the distribution, the acquisition of power. If we do not have the amount of power that we are entitled to and to use that power in ways that are positive for our community, that power will go to other people, less sensitive to the needs of the African American community, less concerned about the issues that the African American community has to confront. And that is why we're only looking for fairness here. We're not looking to come up with something that disproportionately gives power to a community or another. We just want to have a fair count to make sure that the distribution of power is consistent with the numbers that a fair census will actually uncover. And the people who formed this nation understood the importance of the census. The founding fathers put in our Constitution the obligation that the federal government every 10 years had to perform a census. This is in our founding documents. And there was a recognition even back then in the 18th century that in terms of the distribution of power, which is a lot of many of our compromises in the formation of this nation was all about the distribution of power, that finding out how many people were in each locality, in each state, that was of primary importance, and that's why the census is of constitutional magnitude. It's why we have to participate in it to make sure that the communities that we come from have the power that they deserve.
Thank you so much, A.G. Holder, for that. We really appreciate it. There are so many ways, of course, that the 2020 census impacts our lives, as you mentioned, for the next decade. And so we are looking at allocating over $1.5 trillion to states, cities, and counties across the country. Remember to press 9 if you're on the phone to speak and ask a question to one of our panelists and special guests tonight. I'm going to now turn with a question to Representative Horsford. How has the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation been working to ensure Black men are counted fairly and accurately across the nation?
Thank you, Ed. And I also know we have thousands of people joining us. One of my esteemed colleagues from Nevada, who is also the Sire Archon elect of Delta Theta Boulay in Las Vegas, and he's also our State Attorney General, Aaron Ford, is on the call, and I am really excited for him. He is the first African American to be elected to a statewide constitutional office in Nevada, and is another example of why the census matters from the representation that Attorney General Holder just talked about. But as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus 2020 Census Task Force, we've been working for more than the last year to ensure that every single community knows about the importance of the census count and the funding that is responsible for the allocation that comes to each of our communities. Not only does the census allocate more than $1 trillion in federal funding, it also allocates congressional representation, as Attorney General Holder just talked about. The last time the census was completed in our country, my current seat in Congress was created in 2010, and I became the first African American, first person of color, in fact, to represent my state of Nevada in Congress. So representation matters, federal funding matters, and we've been working diligently to convey that message to every household across the country. We've put together, with the help of Fair Count, toolkits for each of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus. We've held town halls, job fairs around the census when we were able to do so, and most importantly, providing that information to each of our constituents to talk about the impact to our schools, to our hospitals, to funding for senior housing and grants for small businesses. These are the benefits that our communities receive from the census, and when we are counted, that money gets to our community, but unfortunately, when we're not counted, that money gets allocated to other communities. So that's why this is so important tonight, and I want to thank Fair Count, Mr. Morial, and Attorney General Holder for your leadership tonight. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Horsford. And thank you for those who are just joining the call. You can press 9 on your phone again to ask your question. Again, you can press 9 on your phone to ask your question. Next question I'm going to go to is for Dr. Vincent. So Dr. Vincent, Fair Count and Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity have a national partnership to engage Black men in the 2020 census. Why was this so important to you in Sigma Pi Phi?
Well, Mr. Reed, thank you so much for convening this. I also want to thank Stacey Abrams for her outstanding work and and galvanizing us around this critical constitutional issue. I want to thank my brothers, Attorney General Holder, Mayor Morial, and Representative Horsford for joining us on this very important discussion. Sigma Pi Phi, as mentioned, was founded in 1904 as the oldest Black Greek letter organization, and since its inception was committed to social action and uplift of community. For a number of years, we did that in a very private way. In the wake of the civil rights movement, we decided to take more public stances and to engage in social action to particularly address the needs of young Black men and boys. And so one of the ways we accomplish that is to partner with the National Panhellenic Fraternities. And during the last 5 Congressional Black Caucus weeks, we have convened meetings with the leaders of the NPHC fraternities. And as part of our meeting, we set an agenda, 2, of course, that are directly relevant to our conversation today. One is to ensure that all Black males are counted for the 2020 census. And again, that has been so well covered by the previous speakers about the constitutional mandate and the need to ensure that we get the power and the access that we are deserved and entitled to. The other issue, of course, is to directly address the health disparities that impact the Black community. We know that with this pandemic, it has disproportionately impacted the Black community and the Black male community. And so we made a commitment to address these issues. The reason why it was important that we come together is that we believe that this was the best way for us to engage young people, to ensure that they understand the need to be active citizens and to fully engage in our democratic society. When we talk about the historic Brown decision, we talked about the reason why everyone needed to have access to a quality education was so they could fully participate in our democratic society. And the census is one of those critical reasons why we need to be informed, engaged, and to participate, not just to vote, but again, that voting is so critical. And I want to applaud Attorney General Holder as well as Stacey Abrams for actively engaging in this redistricting efforts along with the Congressional Black Caucus. All of these efforts are critical. So at the grassroots level, both the Sigma Pi Phi and the NPHC fraternities and related organizations like the Urban League and the NAACP are ensuring that at the grassroots level, that at the local level, we are ensuring that every Black male understands that it's their constitutional duty to fill out the census, be counted, to ensure that their communities get the resources that they need so that we can fully thrive and address the issues that are directly impacting our communities. And then on a positive note, ensure that we are fully counted so that we are well represented, like with Congressman Horsford in the Congress. As mentioned, I want to thank Attorney General Ford out of Nevada for leading those important efforts out there, and so many of you who are doing that work in our communities.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Vincent, for that insight. Now we're moving to another poll question. Each participant can answer by pressing a button on your phone, and we'll share the results in a couple of minutes. Please wait to hear all of the answers before you press a button. Again, we're going to our poll question number 2. So here's a question. What are some of the concerns that you think Black men have with completing the 2020 census? Again, what are some of the concerns that you think Black men have with completing the 2020 census? Press 1 if you think privacy and security concerns are top of the list. Press 2 if you think suspicion of the government is at the top of the list. Press 3 if you think lack of interest is at the top of the list. And press 4 if you think lack of understanding of the importance of the census is at the top of the list. And again, I'm going to go through those responses. Press 1 if you think privacy and security concerns are the issue. Press 2 if you think suspicion of the government is the issue. Press 3 if you think lack of interest is the issue. And press 4 if you think lack of understanding of the importance of the 2020 census is the issue. We'll give you a few more seconds to answer that question. Again, where the question was posed, what are some of the concerns that you think black men will have with completing the 2020 census? Press 1 for privacy and security concerns. Press 2 for suspicion of the government. Press 3 for lack of interest. Press 4 for lack of understanding of the importance of the 2020 census. So we're going to now turn to our participant questions. We have quite a few of them in the queue, so we want to make sure that we're able to get to as many of them as possible. So we are going to turn to Robert, Mr. Robert Harris, who is on the call. And Mr. Harris has a really good question. And Mr. Harris, you're now live on the call. If you want to go ahead with your question.
Yes, thank you for taking my question, first of all. And God bless you guys for what you're doing. But I wonder if, I know what our African-American population rate is, and we don't even make up 25%. So I'm wondering how much of a voice do we really have? And as I told the questionnaire, I'm a retired federal law enforcement officer, and so are a lot of my friends. And we're trying to do the best we can to raise our children the right way, to raise our grandchildren the right way. And I just wonder if we're really in this fight as African Americans, men and women, alone. Are we on our own?
Thank you so much, Mr. Harris, for that great question. I'm going to turn now to our panelists. Any of the panelists want to chime in to speak to Mr. Harris's question?
Yeah, this is Eric Holder. I mean, what I'd say, it's a good question. What I would say is that it is true that we're not a quarter of the population, something like that. But there are tens of millions of African Americans in the country. I'd say close to 35, 40 million African Americans. And that is a very substantial number of people. And that number of people, properly counted, can have a great impact on the direction, political direction, societal direction of this country. But it is a question of being identified, being counted, and then participating in the life of the country. The census count is particularly important in that way because it quantifies in a very neutral way the number of African Americans, where we are in fact located, and gives us a basis, a factual government-sanctioned basis to say these are the needs that we have, these are the concerns that we have, this is the number of people that we have in this particular place. So I don't think you can underestimate the power of the census, and also we should not underestimate the power that we have as a community. There, as I said, tens of millions of African Americans who, if appropriately counted and appropriately motivated, can still be and should be a powerful force for positive change in this country.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Yeah. May I add to that? Yeah, I think
absolutely.
General Holder captured the essence of it. Let me add a few things. When it comes to the African American community, it's where we are located that gives us political power and leverage. So in states like Virginia and North Carolina and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan, no doubt in states like Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, our populations are above 15% for the most part, trending up to Louisiana, South Carolina, and Mississippi, where we're more than 30% of the voters. In Mississippi, more than 40%, more than 30% of the population. And in Mississippi, more than 40% of the voters, of the population and the voters. That concentration and making sure that we are fully counted is so critical. When we are counted, we maximize the number and the power we have in the Congress, in state legislatures, and in city councils. The best estimates is that before the 2020 census, there were 44, maybe 45 million black people in the United States. That's more people than are in Spain. We are larger as a community than most nations. Our spending power is 1.5 trillion. That's almost as much as the GDP of the Russian Federation. We cannot underestimate our power and our influences, even though we're a numerical minority, because of where our power is and where our power is located, if we maximize that power. So we've got to be counted. And in the last census, many black men were missed. We cannot be missed. So if you're not the person filling out the form in your home, you want to make sure you're included on that form. People have to include their babies, their children, and you have to include people who live in the dwelling with you, even if they're not related by blood, like even if their name is not, quote, on the lease. All this information is private. It's confidential. Don't let anybody strike you out. If somehow somebody's going to get hold of this information, it's a crime. If anyone exposes the information, we want to seize the moment to ensure that we are fully counted. We need to seize this time at this crisis point in American history to make sure we're not locked out and left out of this important count.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morial, for that response, and thank you, A.G. Holder, for your response. We really appreciate that, a great insight. We're now going to turn to another participant question, and so we're going to go to Ms. Wilson. Ms. Carolyn Wilson, at this time, we're going to unmute you, and you will be live on the line. Would you like to go ahead and ask your question to our panel of special guests tonight? Ms. Wilson, are you there? Okay, well, Ms. Wilson did have a really good question, and I'm going to go to, I'm going to ask Congressman Horsford if he would chime in on this. And that question was, what does the extension of the census look like? And are there potentials of an extension in the future as well as it relates to the 2020 census?
Thank you. Well, to be clear, the Census Bureau has to submit their recommendation to extend, and it requires some congressional review. So I know the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will have a say. And while on the face of it, it sounds good to extend the date in order to allow for self-response until the end of October due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they also are requesting that the data that gets reported to the states gets delayed until July of 2021. Now, that's problematic because that will delay potentially the redistricting process and other important information that can be used to help fund resources for our states. For example, my home state of Nevada, we only are in our legislature every other year for 120 days. So we would be out of session and not able to receive the data until July if the date holds of 2021. That could delay the redistricting process for our congressional boundaries as well as our legislative boundaries. So this is something that I think still requires a lot of congressional oversight and an investigation before we determine whether or not it's something that should be supported. But nonetheless, our community, and Attorney General Holder talked about it, we have more than 4 million black people, according to Color of Change, who could be undercounted, and a higher percentage are black men. So that's why this call is so important, to make sure that we underscore the importance of us being counted, that we make sure our families are counted, that we address any myths that are out there. One of the things I want to answer directly off the top is that it doesn't matter if someone's previously incarcerated. It doesn't matter their immigration status. We have a lot of African and Caribbean immigrants. They are to be counted. If someone is formerly or currently unhoused, they are to be counted. So all of these populations are important. are important
Great.
in the count.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Horsford, for that insight and that response. We're now going to turn to the results of our second poll question. So again, that question, for those of you that may not remember, the concerns about the 2020 census. What were the concerns? Exactly 50% of our callers said that lack of understanding of the importance of the census was what they suspected as one of the concerns that why Black men are not completing the 2020 census. And then at 23% were suspicion of the government, 16% lack of interest, and then 11% privacy and security concerns. So I want to turn to you, A.G. Holder, and see if you have some insight, or what do you think about those results that are coming in with nearly half of the callers saying that they think Black men really lack the understanding of the importance of the 2020 census, and then followed by suspicion of the government.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why calls like this are so important, to make people understand exactly why the census is important. It's about power, it's about money, it's about fairness, it's about communities getting their fair share from the federal government. So there is that. And I understand the suspicions as well. This is a government-run program. There's one that I said is of constitutional dimension. But I think people should also find a certain degree of comfort in responding, understanding that information that is shared with the Census Bureau cannot be shared with other parts of the government. If, for instance, and it was tried, many years ago, the FBI, under the direction then of J. Edgar Hoover, tried to get access to census data, and that caused quite a stir, and then laws were put into place, regulations were put into place to make sure that that kind of sharing of information did not occur. So I think that people should first understand why this is important: power, money, and also have, as I said, a degree of comfort that information shared with the Census Bureau will be used for the appropriate purposes and will not be used for things that are inconsistent with the simple counting that is done, and then the use of the data for the use of government services. But in terms of the investigative part of the federal government, law enforcement agencies of the federal government, they don't have access to that information.
Great. Thank you so much, A.G. Holder, for that insight and that response. I'm now going to turn to another participant question from our audience. We have some really great questions that are coming in, so our screeners are doing a really good job of making sure that they are talking to folks on the other side of the line to get these questions in. So I want to turn now to Mr. Sanford Hillsman. Mr. Sanford Hillsman, who's on the line, he has a really good question as it relates to Black men and the engagement and importance of the 2020 census. So, Mr. Hillsman, you're live on the line. You can go ahead with your question.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and it's a fantastic job that you guys are doing. My question, and I heard the Congressman say earlier that somehow we need to count the unhoused, if you will. That's a large problem that I see in this community, is that there are a number of homeless people around. How do you count those people? How do you get these men involved? How do you get their families to say to them, you are an important part of this? And in the area that I'm presently now, it's hard to even get people to do anything to go outside, for instance, because I'm in Albany, Georgia, the epicenter of the state with the COVID-19 thing. And there are a number of African-American men that I know in this community that are still living under bridges and overpasses. How do we address that? How do we get the word out to these people? How do we give them more education? What do we say to our state legislators or our congressmen? Get the message out, people. I see all of these commercials for everything else. I don't see that message coming out to the Black community at all. Something else needs to be done.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hillsman, for that great question.
Yeah, I want to let me respond, and I'll respond by saying this is an important question, and it's a question that's come up frequently in the years that I've worked on census and been an advocate for complete count. Here's what, and I want to underline this. Here's what the Census Bureau shared with us. They indicate that they have special teams of enumerators that will go out to areas where the unhoused may be living in the community, whether it be under bridges or on the streets, to interview them for the purposes of the census. And that secondarily, they will go to group quarters, is the term they use, which would mean homeless shelters, to seek administrative records, which would be the roster of the people who are living in that shelter. Now, this is what they tell us. I have no reason to discount them, but I have no accountability measure to ensure that that approach gets done. Here's what we have to do. We have to understand that the census is a dwelling place count. So here's an example. I live in the home that I first lived in, which is my grandmother's house. There were 4 generations of the family who lived in that house at one time. So we have many multi-generational homes. We also have homes where different branches of a family. We even have homes where people who are not related may be residing together. There's one count per dwelling, and everyone in the dwelling that considers the dwelling to be their place of domicile/residence should be counted on that form. We can't miss our men, we can't miss our babies, we can't miss our children. In many respects in our community, those forms will be filled out by women who in many of our homes are the heads of households. So we've got to remember that if I'm living in a house in an apartment, and I live there with, let's say, my 2 children, and my sister lives with me, there's no one child. She's not going to fill out a form, and then I'll fill out a second form. We have one form that maybe I'll fill it out, maybe she'll fill it out, it'll come to the house, or I'll go online and count everybody in the house, living in the house, considering the house at home as of April 1 in 2020. So census indicates that they seek to count group quarters. There's a nursing home. Those who may be unhoused, those who may be in college dormitories, by seeking the administrative records of those particular facilities and utilizing that for the count, or by sending a special team of enumerators to the facility. Now, we know that cannot happen in a COVID environment. So this is a live question for us to test and discuss and seek transparency and accountability from the Census Bureau as to how they're going to ensure that the unhoused and those that live in group quarters are counted effectively, and has the Census Bureau been able to execute on its plan. That is a live issue for those of us as advocates to ensure, and we push the Census Bureau to be transparent, to let the community know. So one thing we have this year that's never existed in the census is that you can go online to the Census Bureau's website and you look at the response rate down to the census tract, which is equivalent to a neighborhood. You can look at the response rate in your neighborhood, for example, to determine whether the response rate is aligned with the response rate for the state or for the city. And that's an important new element for those of us that are on the front line and want to know how's the response rate in this community, how's the response rate in that community. And I underscore my comments by saying this is what Census Bureau has indicated to us in the many conversations we all have had with them as civil rights leaders and as members of the Black Census Roundtable and as other interested citizens on the issue of the homeless. Those are housed in dormitories and nursing homes has come up. It's an important question. It's a good question, and I'm very, very glad you asked.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morial, for that response and that insight. So each new topic that we address brings more questions from our participants, and so we do have some time for a couple additional questions. But as Mr. Morial alluded to, you can complete the census now by visiting my2020census.gov. Again, my2020census.gov. And you can also find out more information about Black Men Count by visiting blackmencount.org. We're now going to turn to another participant question. Mr. Willie Sneed is on the line. Mr. Willie Sneed is on the line. We're going to turn to him for his question. Mr. Sneed, you are live on the line. If you want to go ahead and ask our panelists your great question.
Yes, I had a question earlier. First of all, I'm in southwest Georgia, down there, Albany, Americus, Georgia. And what I see here as far as the census is concerned, as well as the same thing for voting rights and this kind of thing, I see Black men that are not interested in anything in the political system, period. They don't care. And there's a number of them going around, and they have no interest, and you try to talk to them, and they just bypass it totally, completely. What I see is what we used to do. I was back in the civil rights 1960s, and what we used to do a house-to-house type thing, and that was more effective than anything that I've ever seen, because that created some interest, it gave them some insight, and educated them at the same time. But right now, it's not being done anymore, because what happened at that time, we wasn't getting the money for it. We didn't look for any money. We were doing things for our own civil rights. But now it's a different ballgame. These kids now, from the age of 17 through 25 or 30, don't care about anything.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sneed, for that great question. I want to turn to Dr. Gregory Vincent with Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity to see if he might have any insight or response to provide.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think that's one of the reasons why when I say that the Greek letter, Black Greek letter organizations have made a commitment to really do this at the grassroots level and really do this at the retail level, whether it's at the barbershop, whether it's community centers and schools, the young men that we mentor to share with them the critical importance of filling this out. As we saw from the polls, we see that there's great disinformation out there, and it's our job as senior members of the community to educate our young people, not just for the 2020 census, but going forward. And so it is our job, and we have to take a proactive stance and, again, do this at the grassroots retail level. And that's what we've committed to do, both through our collective impact with our Greek letter organizations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vincent, for that great response. So we're going to go to our third poll question of the night. Again, if you have questions for the panelists, you can press 9 on your phone. Again, press 9 if you have questions for our panelists. We still have some really good questions in the queue, and we should be able to get to at least 1 or 2 more. But we want to go to poll question number 3. And the question is, I hope you've enjoyed tonight's call as much as me, but I also want to make sure that everyone is leaving with their marching orders. So will you commit to doing the following? 1, press 1 if you'll tell 10 friends, family members about the importance of the 2020 census. Press 2 if you'll complete the 2020 census tonight online. Press 3 if you'll share the importance of the census to you on social media tonight. And press 4 if one or more of the above are true. Again, press 1 if you're going to tell 10 family members or friends about the importance of the 2020 census. Press 2 if you're going to complete the 2020 census tonight online. Press 3 if you share the importance of the census to you and what it means to you personally on social media. And then press 4 if one of the more of those options apply to your situation. We're going to now go to Mr. Tommy Alexander. Mr. Tommy Alexander is on the line, and we're going to unmute his line and allow him to go live. Mr. Tommy Alexander, he has a great question. If you can go ahead, Mr. Alexander, with your question.
Yes, I was just curious about, if we couldn't trust the election, and why would us trust this census that's going on? We got all our brothers and sisters out here voting and everything. Our vote looks like it don't count, so, that's why a lot of folks are curious about this census y'all got sending out and everything,
Thank you so much, Mr. Alexander, for that really great question. Attorney General Holder, would you like to provide some insight?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the nature of the question. There's a lot of distrust in our government now, in our electoral system that's been attempted to be manipulated by people to come up with, particular results. But that doesn't mean I think that we withdraw from participating. I mean, I think that by participating, we increase the power that we have in reforming a system that has kind of, gotten off the rails a bit. I think the census has generally been one under Republicans as well as Democrats that has done a fairly good job, fairly neutral job. I'm a little worried about the effort this time. But one of the things that we have to do is to make sure that we participate, in numbers that are really, really substantial, that we rely on, the great leaders that we have, like in Congress, Congressman Horsford, to do oversight to make sure that the count is being done in appropriate ways. And as I said before, on the basis of what happens here, on the basis of our participation in the census, we'll either have more power or less power. If we have greater amounts of power, we then have the ability to pull the levers on government to make sure that the kinds of concerns expressed by the caller are not ones that we have to worry about. And, everything kind of grows from the census. The census is kind of the foundation for the allocation of power in our government at the federal, state, and local levels. And so participating in this gives us an ability to have an impact on the larger government. So I understand the concerns. I understand the doubts. I understand the problems people have with the process. But I think one of the ways in which we make sure that it is as good as it can be is by engaging in it. There's no downside to engaging in it. There's only an upside. Yeah. But not participating leads to all kinds of negative consequences.
Well, thank you, Steven.
Yeah, Matt,
Horsford.
Go ahead, Congressman.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to say, it's the same forces that are discouraging people from participating in the voting process, the people who wanted you to stand outside for hours in Wisconsin in the rain, jeopardizing your very life to be able to cast a vote. Those are the same forces that don't want us to be counted in the census. Why? Because for every single person that is not counted, it's $20,000 estimated loss a year in funding that goes to our schools, to our hospitals, for affordable housing, grants for young people to go to college. So they don't want us to have those resources. So we can argue what isn't working, or we can participate and help change what we don't like in our communities. And if we don't like the fact that our schools are underfunded or our hospitals don't have adequate personal protective equipment right now, literally some of the funding that's being allocated during this coronavirus is from data that we use from the 2010 census. And if we're not counted, then we're not getting the resources. So I just want to implore everyone to encourage our brothers in every community across the country to not allow those forces to win out. And for us to do our civic part to make sure that not only are we counted in the census, but that we're counted at the ballot box this November. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Representative Horsford, for that insight. We really certainly appreciate that. We really have some really good participant questions coming in, and we want to get to a few more of them before we close out this evening as well. So right now I'm going to turn to Grace Little Hinton. Ms. Grace Little Hinton out of Chicago, Illinois is on the call. We're going to go ahead and unmute your line. So if you want to go ahead and give your really good question.
Thank you for having this great discussion. My husband's a pastor, and we have a mega church in Chicago. We have several churches up under us. Is there literature that we can get out to, that you guys can give us, or where we can go to get the literature so we can start getting the word out and really getting faith-based involved?
Let me say, unfortunately, if I can get your information, the issue with literature is that COVID-19 sort of stalled our plans. We do have a website, makeblackpack.org, which has lots of information about the census. We've been building that website, and it is absolutely available to you. We had literature early on. I'm not so sure if we have any more because the center was shut down and it affected our ability to print. So I'd ask you to go to makeblackcount.org and take a look at the information there, and perhaps that information could be reproduced in some fashion to share it with you all. We're operating in the COVID environment, and we have, and I wonder if you're in Chicago, if the Chicago Urban League, I say that they may have some printed material, so you may want to check with them. But what I want to thank you for is for empowering yourself and you, your husband, and your congregation as a way to talk. And I'm going to encourage everyone, we have to run to the tape on this. This census process now is all the way through October. Through October, one can fill the form out online on a computer or on a smartphone. There will be opportunities to fill out a paper form, and later the opportunity when the door knockers show up. But I want to really, really encourage all of us to take leadership in our circles, in our churches, in our neighborhoods, in our family circles. Talk about the census, and I couldn't agree more with Representative Horsford said. He said, he almost, Representative, you read my mind. We can't let those that want to trick and deceive us into not participating so they can have their power, into somehow being cynical and negative about the census. Let's not allow ourselves to be bamboozled. The Russians ran a campaign to bamboozle us in the 2016 election, running all these Facebook and Twitter ads, creating fake personalities to say to us, don't vote. And some of us fell for it. Let's not be tricked. Let's not be tricked. Let's do what we have to do. We know what we have to do, and we need to do it. We need to be counted. Make black count.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morial, for that. And I also wanted to add at faircount.org, again, faircount.org, we do have 2 faith toolkits that you can download that could be great organizing material, even amidst everything that's going on with the pandemic. So at faircount.org, under our Faith and Community Partnerships tab, you can download our faith toolkits to be able to organize in your communities still while social distancing. So I want to go to another participant question, this time from Mr. Bernard Brown. Mr. Bernard Brown is on the line. You're unmuted, Mr. Brown, if you would like to go live with your question now at this time.
Yes, I would. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the black leaders that we have today. First question for this panel is, are prisoners or people behind, black men and women behind bars, are they counted in the census, and as well with the homeless? And what are the avenues that are open for us for starting justice reform? Secondly, what are the avenues that we can have so that civics is reintroduced into the schools, because a lot of the young and black men and black women, teenagers, don't understand what the civics does for you going forward in this life, especially now, with understanding how government functions. And if you all just hit on that for me to bring some understanding to the youth, because they don't vote because they don't know what they're voting for or why government acts and puts out whatever they put out for your ears. They don't understand. That's what I'm basically trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'm going to turn to Representative Horsford if you want to give some insight on this particular question.
Well, thank you, Ed. Every individual who is in the United States on April 1st, regardless of whether they are incarcerated citizens or previously incarcerated citizens, homeless, people who are unhoused, undocumented, every single person is to be counted. That is the constitutional mandate. There was an attempt by the Trump administration to add a citizenship question that did not get added. The courts did not agree. And so this census is moving forward with the responsibility to count every single person who resides here as of April 1st. As Mr. Morial and others were saying, there are efforts that the census does to count what they call group quarters and aggregate members, those that are currently incarcerated or that are homeless. There are special teams that go out and make sure that those individuals are counted. The Congressional Black Caucus has been working to make sure, for example, that black men that may be incarcerated get counted in the place that they are originally from, not where the prison is located, because that doesn't get the money to the community that needs it the most. So that has been an issue. Some states, like Nevada, my home state, actually passed legislation to count people who are incarcerated from their previous home address, not from where they're incarcerated. And we have legislation to try to push that forward. So yes, every single individual, regardless of background, is to be counted based on them residing in the United States as of April 1st.
Thank you so much, Representative Horsford. So now we are going to enter our lightning round of closing comments from our special guests. And so I wanted to give them all an opportunity to give some closing remarks at this particular time. So we're going to start very briefly with Dr. Vincent, if you want to give us some closing remarks.
Yes, as we heard from this very important Tele-Townhall, it is absolutely critical that this be a priority for our communities, that we engage at the very local level at our places of faith, fraternal organizations, civic organizations, to ensure that we make sure that every black person is voted for the 2020 census so that our power can be accurately accounted for as we allocate valuable resources.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vincent. And now we're going to go to Mr. Morial, if you want to close us out with some very brief remarks.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you, Ed. And I want to thank Stacey Abrams for her great leadership, Attorney General Holder, Dr. Vincent, and certainly Representative Horsford for participating tonight, but also for your steadfast advocacy on issues related to democracy and justice. I'll go back to where I began. The census is about money and power. We must be counted. We can be counted online, which you can do now. You can be counted when the paper form comes to your home, or you can be counted when the enumerator comes. Our challenge in Black America is to be counted either online or through the paper form and maximize that element, which is called the self-response rate, and not rely, as we do all too often, on the enumerator to come and knock on the door. Black men who are listening, we have to be counted. We have to be conscious of the fact that black men have been undercounted and our children have been undercounted in the past. We've got to be determined to ensure that we're counted, that we're included on the forms, and that we take leadership on this very important issue. And finally, we cannot let those who do not want us to exercise our right at the table of leadership and power in this country, to trick us, bamboozle us, discourage us into not participating with all sorts of weak arguments. Let's be strong. Let's be counted. This is our time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morial. We're going to now go to Representative Horsford.
Well, thank you, Mr. Reed, and thank you to Stacey Abrams, Dr. Abrams, McLean, and the entire Fair Count team for your leadership, Dr. Vincent with the Boulay and Marc Morial with the Urban League, and of course, our Attorney General, Eric Holder. I'm so honored to be on this call with these great Americans who are making sure that our community is not forgotten in this Census 2020 process. We have the power, each one of us, that help effectuate change in our communities. If we encourage our family members, we encourage our friends and coworkers, those at church and our places of worship, we can make sure that our community is counted, that we get the resources and the political representation that our community is due. The Congressional Black Caucus is proud to join with all of you in making sure that this information continues to be of value to our community, and we understand what the census really does mean to us. So thank you for allowing me to participate on the call tonight. God bless you all. Stay safe and healthy. Take care of your families during this time.
Thank you so much, Representative Horsford. Now turning to Attorney General Eric Holder to close us out.
Well, thanks very much. I want to thank everybody for joining us on the call tonight. I hope that you and your families will stay well as we deal with the current public health crisis. It's good to be on the phone with my friends, Congressman Horsford, Marc Morial, Dr. Vincent, as we've had a chance to discuss an important, but I think too often overlooked topic. As I said, the census is a foundational component of our democracy. It's in our Constitution, and we need to make sure that people of color, and particularly black men, are counted. Historically, black men have experienced a very high undercount rate in the census. If you look at what happened during the 2010 census under the Obama administration, that's a time when we had an administration who was actually interested in getting a fair, accurate count. The net undercount rates by age group of black men is as follows. Black men 18 to 29 were undercounted by 6%. Black men aged 30 to 49 were undercounted by 10%, and this is among the highest undercount rates recorded in the 2010 census. And black men 50 and above were undercounted by 3%. Now, this is very concerning for more than a few reasons. And the first is the census data, again, as we said, is used to distribute power. The United States House seats among the states, and then it's the basis for the redistricting process that will occur in 2021 that will decide state power around the country. And it means if you're not counted, your community loses political power. It is really that simple. The census, as has been said, is also used by the federal government to help distribute more than, $900 billion, almost $1 trillion in money for education, health care, and for infrastructure. So again, if you're not counted, then your community loses out on funding for public schools, for health care, for new roads, and for bridges in your area. The census comes once every 10 years. This is our once-in-a-decade chance to make sure that we're standing up and that we're getting counted, not just for ourselves, but for our communities and for the future of our community. The good news is that the census is easier than ever to fill out. If you've not received a piece of mail from the Census Bureau that tells you how to respond, just go to my2020census.gov to fill out the questionnaire. It's a fast way. It's an easy way. I filled out my form for my family. It took just really a few minutes. The census, as I said, happens only once every 10 years. If we don't get it right, it's going to profoundly reshape our country, and it's going to hurt our community for the next decade at least. So thank you again for all hopping on the phone with us tonight. Let's be involved, let's get counted, and let's vote in November. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Holder, for joining us, and thank you all of our special guests for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time, and thank you for the participants and the great questions that we had. As Attorney General Holder mentioned, my2020census.gov is where you can complete your census in a matter of minutes. You can also call in the toll-free number at 1-844-330-2020. Again, 1-844-330-2020. You can also find out more information about Black Men Count by visiting blackmencount.org. And if you wait a second at the very end of this call, you will be able to leave a message detailing why the 2020 census is important to you and your family. Again, on behalf of Fair Count and our special guests on the call, thank you for joining tonight's call. And remember, Black Men Count. Have a great night. Thank you.